Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you to everyone who's joining us online as well. My name is Rachel South, and I manage the bookshop at Pushkin House, and I'm very pleased to welcome Jens Siegert and Simon Cosgrove for tonight's discussion, which is organized by the Pushkin Club and is entitled, "Where is Russia Heading? Scenarios for a Post-Putin Future." I'll just say a few words of introduction, and then I'll hand over to Jens and Simon. Jens Siegert is a journalist, writer, and expert on Russian domestic and foreign politics and Russian society. Until January 2021, he was the team leader of the EU project, Public Diplomacy, EU and Russia. He was the director of the Moscow office of the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung until 2015, an office which he set up in 1999. Jens publishes regularly about Russia, especially the relationship between Russia and the West, the structure of Russia's political system and Russian civil society, and has published 3 books about Russia. His latest book is Where is Russia Heading? Scenarios for the Time After, which was published in German last year. Dr. Simon Cosgrove is chair of the trustees of Rights in Russia and is currently editor of the Rights in Russia website. He has many years' experience working on grant-making programs supporting human rights organizations in Russia, first with the European Commission and then with the US-based MacArthur Foundation. Simon has also worked as a researcher for Amnesty International and served as a member of the board of the EU-Russia Civil Society Forum. Simon is also the author of Russian Nationalism and the Politics of Soviet Literature, the case of Nash Savremennik, 1981 to 1991, which was published in 2004. So thank you again for joining us tonight, and we hope you enjoy the talk.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I think the microphone is working okay? No. I think, now is it working okay? Yes?
Yep. Simon.
Okay.
Simon.
Speak closer to it.
Yeah, no.
Good, okay. Right, well, it's a real pleasure to have Jens Siegert as our guest this evening. He's someone who has a really, really rich knowledge and experience of Russia. As Rachel was saying, he's been many things. In many ways, he's on one hand, he's a Green Party activist, you could say. He worked for many years as head of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation office in Moscow. He's also been a journalist, and for many years he was also the leader. I think it was 16 years you were head of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation in Moscow, which works, at least in part, as a grant-making organization. And for several years he was also, after that, he was head of an EU project, which was basically trying to bring grassroots organizations together to find a kind of a community of aspirations and activities, building relations between the EU and Russia. Afterwards, he has become now it'd be wrong to say writer, because I think you've been a writer for many years before then, but he's published 3 books. The one we're here to discuss is this one, which is Wohin treibt Russland? And maybe I will leave my German colleague Jens to translate that. But
You are the English speaker.
I'm just being funny. But I would like to ask, first of all, Jens, so you were basically in Moscow from 1993 until, if I may say so, until September 2024, I should say also, obviously, we're looking forward to having questions from the audience. But I would like to ask, maybe just to start with a couple of questions. One question is, how did you get to Moscow? Why did you go there in 1993?
It's a long story. I'm considering where to begin. The first thing is that I hadn't a clue about Russia more than an informed newspaper reader. before 1990. It was not part of my interest. And then in the end of 1990, I met in Cologne a group of people from Minsk, today in Belarus, at that time part of the Soviet Union, which were working on the victims of the Chernobyl catastrophe. They had set up, at that time, I think nobody used the term non-governmental organization or civil society organization. They had organized such an organization which named To the Children of Chernobyl, and they dealt with helping children from the polluted zones in Belarus. And they came by invitation of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. It's a green-linked political foundation linked with the Green Party in Germany, by invitation there to discuss and to report about the situation there. And as you may all know, this was a time where the Soviet Union already opened up to a quite big extent. It became possible to travel for Soviet citizens to the West, for Western citizens to Soviet Union, and to get to know more than the more or less official point of view. And they invited us to come to Belarus, as I think they themselves said it's white. Is there a term of white Russia? Yeah, in English, not Belarus at that time, and then to see. And so in January '91, exactly on the 11th of January '91, I first crossed the border to the Soviet Union. And I was a beginning freelance journalist, and at once I saw a very, very wide field of possibility to report about that. And the background was that most accredited correspondents, Western correspondents, German correspondents in Moscow, they were very busy with politics. Political situation changed almost every day, but in the West, at least in the German public, and I assume that it was in the UK or in France or in other countries in the West, the same. There was a very big interest to getting to know more about daily life in the Soviet Union, or as many people at that time said, in Russia. You know, I remember that most people don't really differentiate it between the Soviet Union and Russia. And so I began to travel very often to Russia and to report about that. And in '93 I got the possibility, the invitation to work as a freelance radio correspondent in Russia, reporting for German private radios about all days public politics in Russia. That's how I ended up in Russia, and yeah, then the country caught me. My first contract was for 2 years, and then another contract for 2 years, and so on. I got to know my wife. She is a Russian national, and yeah, I stuck there.
I was thinking beforehand about our meeting this evening. I was thinking to myself that in many ways, obviously not you alone, Jens, but in many ways, you know, your experience, your life in Russia, it kind of personifies in many ways so many things that have happened in Russia. You know, the opening out of the country to new people, all the hopes that have been connected to Russia. And in many ways, you know, the fact that you finally, well, who knows, finally, it's the wrong word to use, but that you left at the end of last year, in many ways, it's a significant moment in not only in your life, but in the history of the country. If I may, I'd like you just, before we go on to the book, I'd just like you perhaps I'd invite you anyway to reflect on those the work that you did. You were a journalist. You were working in grant-making organization. You were working for the EU project. You've been writing books, and obviously, you have each of those activities has a kind of different perspective on what was happening in Russia. Maybe you could give us some idea of what you found most rewarding about those different kinds of activities, and if there was any particular insights from particular kinds of activity that you feel you've obtained.
You know, I think in the 90s we all those Westerners or foreign people in Russia who were there and working there, we had the feeling that we are experiencing live how history was going on. Yeah, we were part of history, of something really historical, which was going. The opening up of such a closed country not only for the past 70 years of the Soviet Union, but Russia before the Russian Empire has been a very closed shop as well, and that was extraordinary to get to know an for us totally unknown world. Yeah, for me this was a really eye-opening experience, and to be in the center of this historical moment. And then at that time and even later, I always felt very welcome there. At least from all the people I met there. I've never, as a German, and it may be quite different to go there than as a British citizen. But when I first in January '99 went there, I went there with my backpack of all the cruel things Germans, including my grandfather, have been done in the Soviet Union in Second World War, and I expected a very big reluctance of people there meeting me, and instead of that, people were very, very, very open, and I told them why are you, and we the German did so bad things, so horrible things to you and your people, and the approach was that they didn't link it to individuals. That was, for me, that was very, very astonishing. They said, okay, that's the German state, that was those Nazists that back then, but that's not you. It was more the other way around. So the conclusion for your question is, what draws me most to Russia are the people and the warmth of the people, and that in a way has not changed until today, even in these terrible times, even in the situation when a lot of people I know there and a lot of people I love there, not many people I love there are in favor of Putin, and they are in favor of this war, which is this criminal war which is going on in Ukraine, and at the same time, these are in personal life very warm and honest people, and I always tried, and I try to bring this together, these two parts. Yeah, how can that be? And the second to that is from the very beginning, my life there and my work there was very closely linked to those people who are today mainly named civil society activists. There have been dissidents in the Soviet Union, but nothing similar to what we call today civil society. So people who are empowering themselves to do something they consider their right and they consider to be a blessing for their society, a good thing for their society. Not to ask anyone, and especially not to ask the state, that they are allowed to do that or that they can do that. And that's in the Soviet Union, in Russia, that was at that time in a way a revolutionary concept. I very much remember that when I went there as a freelance journalist, and as a freelance journalist you go there on your own. There is no no media which is sending you. I was looking where is something interesting. I was going there, sometimes telling those media who might buy some reports from me, whether they are interested or not. But I did it of my own, and everywhere in the Soviet Union I was asked, who has sent you? Yeah? Who sent you? Who gave you the order to come? And when I said nobody, I came of my own, people were very astonished. Many of them didn't believe that, because in the main mindset in Soviet Union, and even today in Russia, this, and especially from the point of view of people who have some function in the Russian state, this is not possible. Everything is managed from a point. There is some bigger plan about that. There must be some state or some authority which sent me. But those people, I got to know, and I began to work with those NGO activists. They didn't care. They did what they think is the right thing to do. They did this of their own, and this is a concept which is for many people in Russia, and especially for the Russian state, something very strange, if not dangerous, until today.
I mean, I could just back up that business about the what people asking what you're really doing. I remember I was about the same time, early 90s, I was a PhD student doing interviews, and several times people said to me, no, Simon, tell me, why are you really here? I said, well, I'm writing my PhD, I'm doing my research. No, tell us why you're really here. So that's a strange thing. So Jens, one word you didn't mention, which you should mention obviously, is you're talking about civil society activists, and you're most closely associated with Memorial. And that is also, so to speak, a tragedy that we're living through as well. You, I think, you can please say a bit more about you. I think you are a member of the board of Memorial in Exile, which is, I believe, Memorial Zukunft, based in Berlin. Could you say a bit more about your relationship to Memorial and also the current situation? Then we must go on to your book.
A big part of the Memorial Society now is in exile, and Zukunft Memorial, which is Zukunft is the future, German word for future, is an organization we set up in Berlin about 3 years ago, and it is not the whole Memorial, it's a part of Memorial, and it tries to support the historical work of Memorial in exile, and the part of this work which is still done in Russia until today. There are not a few activists still in Russia, and they are working in Russia. This is not without danger, but it is still possible. And you have to know that Memorial is quite a big network. There are about 45 different memorial organizations, and about 20, maybe 25 are still legally existing in Russia. They are not forbidden, but what they do can endanger the people which are doing this. And I'm linked with Memorial from almost the beginning on. The Heinrich-Böll Foundation I worked for was one of the earliest supporters, Western supporters of the Memorial of the Memorial International, the umbrella organization of this memorial network, and we supported Memorial in an institutional way. So we not only financed projects, which is the main financial source for NGOs, or has been the main financial source for NGOs in Russia of all kind. But we were supporting the setup of an office and had some projects together with them as well, mostly historical projects. One of our biggest and first projects together was about the fate of the so-named Ostarbeiter, the Eastern workers, which were people from the Soviet Union, the NS, or the German authorities brought to Germany, and they were forced to work there, and many of them died. There are not really clear figures of that, but approximately 8 million people were brought from the Soviet Union, not only from Russia, from the Soviet Union, from Belarus, from Ukraine, and from Russia most, but from other so-named Soviet republics as well, and approximately 2 million of them only returned to the Soviet Union, and the fate of most of them was that they were repressed there in the Soviet Union again, because in the Stalin's Soviet Union, they survived the Nazi camps, and that made them suspicious. Yeah. Most men who survived were sent directly to the Gulag, but the most of the survivors were women, which was due to the duties they had in the forced labor. They were working mostly in the agriculture, where the men were working in the industry and in the coal mines and so on, and that was much more deadly work than for the women. And the women had restraints. They were not allowed to live in big cities. They were not allowed to study, to get a proper education, and they were not allowed to speak. It was a taboo to speak about that, and I made in the beginning of the 90s a lot of interviews with this woman, and they were almost all of them were ashamed of having survived. They were ashamed of having survived, and we set up a big program together with Memorial to get to know more about the fate of these people. And Memorial, within a year in '91, after Soviet media published that Memorial was dealing with that, got about more than 400,000 letters from those people, which is the base of an archive we are working with still. And so I became a friend and a supporter of Memorial, and I tried to do this work until today.
That's great, Jens. So in 2018, you wrote a book called 111 Reasons to Love Russia. In 2021, you wrote a book called In Principle Russia, An Encounter in 22 Terms. And in 2024, you wrote a book which is variously translated as something like Where is Russia Drifting? Or Where is Russia Going? Or In What Direction is Russia Moving? Scenarios for the time after. And I guess my German is limited, but I think the time after means after Mr. Putin. So Jens, so over to you, Jens, if you'd like to introduce your book to us, and then we'll have questions from the hall. Thanks.
What's the question?
No, if you'd like to talk about your book.
About my book, yeah. You named 3 books. The first, it's 111 Reasons to Love Russia. It really sounds a little bit strange today, but it's a part of a series of a publishing house in German, 100 Reasons to Love, and at everything, a football club, mushrooms, or what you can think about. Yeah, France, I think Britain or the UK, there is a book as well. Yeah, there is. Okay. And yeah, there are a lot of reasons to love Russia, but as you know, love is something unconditional. You can't choose it. Love is choosing you, and that's with me and Russia as well. And love is always something you are doing in a way in spite of something. Yeah, in spite of.
So yes, that was 2018. So 2021, your book is In Principle Russia. So your relationship has cooled slightly.
No. In the introduction of this love book, I already write about this. This is love is always something with a backside. Yeah, and love means that your the not so good sides of the subject. Or the object of your love are hurting you much more than the bad sides of something else. Yeah?
So the 2018 book, it was more about trying to Western misunderstandings, perhaps, of Russia. You thought that.
Yeah, it's about getting to know Russia. Yeah, that's a book about everything. I write about Russian cuisine, about Russian landscape. About people in Russia, about Russian culture, about Russian language, almost everything you can
right.
imagine. So,
okay.
so
bringing us up to
better understand.
Bringing us up to 2024, then. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, you are right. This is the working title of the publishing house was Russia After Putin, and when my wife got to know this working title. I told already she is a Russian national. She got very anxious and thought that the name Putin on the title might lead to that I can't live in Russia anymore, because Putin more and more has status of something sacral in Russia, of a saint, and you don't touch something sacral, because then what you get back is much more serious than it is only a politician. So we agreed on this as some sort of a compromise, and the subtitle is a little bit open, but the question is what will happen in Russia, or what might happen in Russia after Putin. And why after Putin? Because for me it is quite clear, quite evident, if you want to take it this way, that as long as Putin is in power in Russia, nothing substantial will change. We will have to deal with a Russia which is aggressive internally to its own people, and which is aggressive externally to its neighbors and to its neighbors. So with this Russia under Putin, you can only deal as the West dealt with the Soviet Union, with containment. Or today, to speak bluntly, we have to support the Ukraine as good as we can, as the West, if the West as such, as a political subject, still exists. I'm not sure that this is the case under Trump or with Trump. But at the same time, I don't think that the West does it even at the moment in a proper way. We have to step up to do so. But even in this situation at the moment, there is already in many countries in the West some fatigue to do so. this fatigue is less the nearer you come to the Russian border, and it's growing. The more you are away from it, with differences. The UK is doing with this, I believe, better than Germany, but in general, this is the rule, and I'm not sure that the West can live up to this, from my point of view, necessity. So what is the alternative? What might be a sustainable solution of the Russian question, if to take it so? And I can think of only one thing which can make Russia a not dangerous neighbor for other European countries, and that is a democratic Russia. And that's a little bit counterintuitive, because we are at the moment at the end of such an experiment, of an experiment of 30 plus years to develop a democratic Russia, an experiment which failed. We failed, the Russians failed, we failed together with that. But then my favorite quote from Samuel Beckett is, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. I ask me the question whether it is right what many people now today claim and think, that Russia is a lost cause in this sense, that democracy and Russia are two things which are not able to exist together, that Russians are not able to become, or Russia is not able to become a democratic state, that Russians don't want to live in a democratic society. And my answer and my experience from the last 32 years I have been living in Russia is that this is not the case. That first, the country in principle is capable for that, and that most Russians want to live in a democratic state. And that's what I try to discuss in the book, why I think so. Why I think that this is the case, and what should happen that this idea materializes. To the first thing, is Russia capable of, or is a society, or is any country capable of democracy? The answer for me is obvious. To say that a country or people or a society is not capable for that is a racist statement, because what should a country or a society prevent from that? All countries who are, or all societies who are today democratic came out of autocratic beginnings. Yeah, the England and then the United Kingdom haven't been democratic at all, and then I'm from Germany. You know, I'm from Germany, and everything what people today say about Russia, about the lost cause, about that democracy in Russia is not coming together, that Russians are inherently aggressive, that they are, like today many people say, they are orcs from the Lord of the Rings. Yeah, that's what people 70, 80 years ago told about Germany. And then it came out that there is a possibility. maybe Germans have been very lucky. Luckily, they have been very luckily that their defeat in Second World War was militarily, politically, and morally a disaster, and that helped very much. And I think that was the case indeed. And many people argue today that such a defeat is not on the table, not on in the nearer future with Russia, because Russia is a nuclear power. That's the main difference, and there won't be such a defeat. Yes, that's right, but other countries succeeded to become democratic countries as well. In the book, I write about the example of Spain, which has been an empire, and nevertheless made its way with many deviations. Yeah, like every democracy developed with deviations, and we see at the moment a very frightening deviation in the US, which has been considered as one of the most stable democracies in the world by almost everybody, and now we see that even that is fragile. That democracy is always a fragile thing. It's a thing. It's like a little bit like driving a bike. It's driving a bike or riding a bike. Yeah, I thought. Riding a bike. If you don't push the pedals, then you fall, and that's with democracy the same. You have always fight for that. But I think, in principle, yes, there is such possibility, such a ability in Russia. Do Russian people wish to live in a democratic society? Polls say quite stable for the last, and polls, there are only polls for the last 35 years. Before then, in the Soviet Union, there haven't been any polls. We don't have data from that time. Polls say yes. The Levada Center has a long history of asking people how their relation to democracy and want their democracy and so on. And for the last 35 years, there hasn't been a poll where less than 50% of Russians answering to this question, do they want to live in a democratic state? No, not once less than 50% answer yes. Yeah, there is a stable majority of Russians who want to live in a democratic society, a democratic state. The other question is, what do Russians understand when they say, I want to live in a democratic state? Because if you are, there's a poll for, I think 2 years ago, they asked people whether they think the United States is a democracy, the UK is a democracy, Germany is a democracy, some other countries again, and whether Russia is a democracy. And for me, very astonishing, the figures were very similar. About 50% think that you thought at that time that the UK is a democracy, that the US is a democracy, that Germany is a democracy, and that Russia is a democracy too. They were convinced that they live in a democratic state. And I think that this is linked to what most people in Russia perceive as democracy. Democracy, a democratic state for them is a state who cares for its people, who cares mainly socially and economically. For its people. It's not so much about rights, it's not maybe even less about freedom. It's about the state caring. And here the 90s in Russia came in, and what is a experience of people in Russia of the 90s? The experience of the 90s is there's first this breakup of the Soviet Union, and most Russians, and this is quite a big difference to people in Ukraine, in the Baltic states, or in Kazakhstan, or in the southern Caucasus, perceive until today the Soviet Union as their home country, as their mother country. They perceive, despite any ideological, they perceive the Soviet Union and as a continuation of the Russian Empire. And what happened at the end of the 1980s or the beginning of the 90s for most people was that their country fall apart, the Russian Empire fall apart. Yeah? And that's in a way this was or is until now a traumatic experience. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is the economy in the Soviet Union wasn't very well at in the 80s, and it was one of the reasons of this happened, the end of the Soviet Union. But the economy in the 90s was even worse. Russian gross national product, national product fall from 91 to 98 by 50%. 50% from not a very, very high level. The country became from a poor country to be a very poor country. Many people survived the 90s because of their grandparents and of their dachas, because the elder people lived in the countryside and grew vegetables and fruits there, which brought them through the winter. Literally, yeah, that's not a metaphor. That's literally so, and at the same time. Politics claimed that this is a democratic state. We have now freedom and we have now democracy. And the link in the head of many Russians is democracy and freedom brings economic decline, yeah, and a state who doesn't care for his people, because the state was more or less absent. The state really didn't care. It didn't have had the money as well to do so. And then Putin came to power, and he did the contrary. And he did it. He was very lucky. It was not because he was such a genius. It was because after the state default in August 98, the economy began to grow again, and the main thing was not the Russian economy beginning to grow again, but the oil price beginning to grow. The oil price from 1989 to 1999, 1999 to 2008 grew every year with at least 50%, sometimes even more. And the Russian state budget until today depends, this changed a little bit from 40 to 60% on revenues of oil and gas export. So. And Putin, what Putin really did, what he really did good, was to use this really to raise welfare in Russia and to re-establish the state as a leading actor. Yeah, the state who withdrew in the 80s from in the 90s, yeah, from many spheres of what it has to do to guarantee welfare of the people, from education, from the medical help, and from security. In the 90s, security was in a way privatized in Russia, and so people began to bring together less freedom and less democracy is linked to more welfare, and this is until today. This linkage is very, very strong in Russia, and if people have to choose this Putin they know, even though after 2010 he's not really delivering very much of that, then people think about what is the alternative. What can I gain if I stand up to Putin? And most people come to the conclusion that's not worth the risk. Yeah, because what will I gain? I will gain someone else who will maybe even be worse than Putin. In this way it's quite a rational choice people are doing in it. So that's why why the thesis in my book is that change can or there can be hope for change only after Putin. Can we be certain that this change will go in a democratic, more liberal, more free direction? No, naturally not. There are a lot of people who are discussing scenarios for Russia's future. I have been part of such scenario processes for quite 3 or 4 times. I remember 2 now, one in 2010 and one in 2020. The second was part of the project, of the EU project I was heading at that time. Simon spoke about that. And always this scenario processes produce 3 or 4 maximum scenarios. One scenario, it's something that everything is going on in the same direction as now. One is a worse scenario and one is a good scenario. And that's today most experts are looking forward to 3 of those scenarios for the time after Putin as well. One might be that there will be a successor who will be very similar to Putin, who will continue this way. Someone probably from those now surrounding him and supporting him. There is a scenario that things will get worse, and there are some sub-scenarios to that. One scenario is a scenario where now Russia is falling apart. I don't consider this a very likely scenario, but nobody can exclude this. And the other thing is that there will be someone even worse than Putin. So imagine that. For me is quite difficult today. Putin is quite bad already. And then there is a scenario that there might be an opening up of Russia again. Not so much because the successor of Putin, whoever that might be, much more likely that this might be a man than a woman, but who knows, that the successor of Putin will be a Democrat. But what Putin now is doing with this war and with this war economy and with his economic politics as well, he's exhausting the country. What we know, we don't really know what is going on inside the power elite in the Kremlin. We are back at the stage where the Kremlin astrology is quite strong. Yeah, you have to look to the stars and to guess what is going on. We know that we speak with people who speak with people who speak with people, and maybe someone spoke with someone who is close to Putin now, and then we are guessing. But all I can draw from that inside the power elite there is still a group, and don't imagine this group like people who met and discussed, but a group because they are like-minded. But maybe even among themselves are not really speaking openly, because that might be dangerous. But there is a group, there are people who think that this way, this course Putin is now going, this confrontation with the West, this war, this almost total war with Ukraine, that this is bad for Russia and bad for Russia's future, and that they might change that if they can, and reconcile with the West, because this is might be better than, for example, become a vassal of China, which is another possible outcome of the developments we have now. And then there might be a possibility of reopening again. Again, let's take a step back, or 35 steps back to the end of the Soviet Union. Neither Gorbachev and I don't think really Yeltsin were at that time very much of Democrats. Yeah, the open up of the Soviet Union and democratic development after that happened in a way by accident as well. Yeltsin became a Democrat because this was his chance to beat Gorbachev in his power struggle with Gorbachev, and he lined with people who were working towards a democratic Russian future. I don't think that he has had really a good idea on what was the democracy, and that's how things historically work. They almost never work because someone has a plan and is conducting this plan. That is, it's a too simple thinking that something happens about that. So, what will happen when Putin steps away, or at the moment much more likely when he dies? Yeah, he's 73 and apparently in good health, so that might take a while until that. But when he dies, then there will be a window of opportunity, and this window of opportunity will open especially because of the kind of state, the kind of regime he constructed, which is very personalized, and everything depends on him. Already some time ago, in the mid 2010s, I talked to people in Russia. I asked people in Russia, imagine Mrs. Merkel, then Chancellor of Germany, and Mr. Putin are in the same plane. The plane crashes, both are dead. What will happen in Germany and what will happen in Russia? And the answer, and people answered to me, yeah, it's okay. In Germany, the Bundestag will gather. There will be a funeral, state funeral, and then they will elect a new chancellor, and nothing will change. Nothing really fundamental will change. Yeah, maybe some policy changes will be, but okay, nothing fundamentally. And in Russia, nobody knows. Nobody, really nobody knows.
If you make a joke about Putin dying, you might end up somewhere where you don't want to end up in prison. I mean, there are people nowadays who make.
Yeah, that wasn't a joke, but you know, it was some 10 years ago, so maybe that was not so dangerous at that time.
Yeah. Jens, if I don't mean to interrupt, but thank you very much for that fascinating kind of review of your book. We'd very much like to open it up to questions from the audience. So please, if you have questions, Rachel will kindly take this microphone around, and perhaps I can choose people. Maybe I can have that role. I'll be able to choose people. The gentleman at the back.
Thank you very much. Having been involved with Russia for all my professional life, I oscillate between optimism and pessimism. And at the moment I'm becoming more pessimistic, and I actually feel that whoever succeeds Putin will probably be as bad, if not worse. But I'm interested in the current position with regard to the relationship with Western Europe and the fact that the Cold War, we have now resumed the Cold War narrative. And we are pledged to spend ever so much more on defense, which probably the UK can't afford, but that because of the quote unquote threat from Russia. Now, what I would like you to answer and discuss is how real do you think that threat is? How far west would Putin like to go? And how seriously are we to take Russia as a current threat with regard, say, to, well, the Baltics, Poland, perhaps even Norway, which we hear about the whole time? Is that realistic?
Good, thank you very much. Could we perhaps have a couple more questions and then Jens can answer them all? The lady in white.
First of all, thank you so much. I found it very interesting that you used the word window of opportunity. It reminded me of my undergraduate dissertation, which I studied Russian at university, and I wrote about venture capital in Russia and why it never developed, despite the fact that there are so many wonderfully innovative people. And I also used the word window of opportunity, so fortochka in Russian. I wonder, could you speak perhaps a bit more about how you see the economy evolving, and do you see any window of opportunity for a market economy at any point? I appreciate, culturally and socially things might look different, but do you think one kind of precedes the other? Is it kind of chicken and egg? Yeah, just if you could speak a bit about the economy, that would be really helpful.
Yes, thank you very much. That was interesting. I also spent my whole professional life working on the former Soviet Union, and former Soviet Union. So I found you. Yes. So I'm surprised by your optimism. Russia has never had a leader so far who did not come out of the ranks of the Soviet elite. So, Putin is KGB, and we had Gorbachev, and we had Yeltsin. Nobody yet has come forward who has not been part of the Soviet establishment. So I just wonder, where is this democratic leader to come from? Because I don't see anyone. And the Putin regime has itself eradicated anybody who could possibly play a role in politics, as there is no opposition. So there is nobody with that experience.
Thank you very much. So if we take those three questions, Jens, to start with, first of all, it was about how real is the threat to the West. Second one is about the economy. opportunities, and the third is no room for optimism.
Thank you very much for your interesting questions about optimism and pessimism. There is a Russian joke. The optimist says, "Oh, it's so bad it can't get worse," and the pessimist said, "It's so bad it can't get worse," and the optimist answered, "It can, it can." Yeah, that's a very Russian approach to that. The threat, the Russian threat. The Russian threat is to NATO countries is real but not very big. What Putin is demanding is a fundamental change in the European system of security, and what he wants, and I'm only paraphrasing the demands Russian officials and he himself always repeat, is a system where Russia has in Europe the last word about everything. This is part of a sort of a traditional understanding of Russian political elites of Russian security. There is no such thing like Russian security. There is only more or less insecurity. And to be more secure, you have to have more and better more than less. How to say, zones of Russian influence around Moscow. There is a Russian journalist, Maxim Trudalubov. He for a long time worked for the Russian daily newspaper, not the Kommersant, Vedomosti. Yeah, for the Vedomosti. He was the opinion editor of the Vedomosti. Now he writes for Medusa from Riga out. And he once described this as concentric circles around Moscow, around the Kremlin, really. Yeah, there are Kremlin walls, then there is the boulevard ring, then the garden ring, then the MKAD, the motorway ring, and then the Betonka, which is about 50 kilometers from the center of Russia, was built in the 70s. That tanks can travel around, and so on. Yeah, and so on. And that's what is the in a way the end game. What does Putin need, therefore, is to challenge the dominance of NATO in Europe. And there are already signs that this dominance is weakening. It's still there, but that it's weakening. And the current US president is doing a lot to weaken it more. After the first telephone call between Putin and Trump in February, the Russian media, the propaganda media, triumphed that Article 5 of NATO is dead. And that's all about. Article 5 has to be dead, because Article 5 is preventing Russia from threatening to intervene. And what might happen in some future, I don't think that this will happen while the war in Ukraine is still going on. But after the war in Ukraine, and depending on the outcome of this war, this how to say this убеждение, the conviction in Russia that Article 5 is dead, to test this. Is this really the case? And there I can very much imagine a scenario that something like 2014, in March 2014, happened in Crimea, might happen, for example, in Estonia. Yeah, that so-named polite green people will show up in Narva and the east of Estonia, where the population is 90% Russian-speaking and ethnic Russians, who are not very pleased with the government in Tallinn. Not that they are separatists, but that's like every minority in every country. Yeah, you know, the Scottish in the United Kingdom are not very pleased with the English as well. That does not mean that they will begin a war or a civil war against London, but that's in Estonia as well. And then the Russians will see what will happen. Will NATO react? And judging on what at the moment American politicians, leading American politicians, including Trump, are saying, it's very doubtful that NATO will intervene then. And then really, maybe Article 5 really is dead. And that's what is going. It's not so much about a big war, but it's about testing and then dominating. And if this tests from a Kremlin point of view were successfully, then you can imagine it's going on, because as I said already, there is no such thing like enough influence in this thinking of a principal insecurity.
Yeah, Jens, I'm beginning to feel insecure at the moment, because I know we have a lot of questions probably people want to ask. So if we can move on to the second question,
to the economy. I'm not an economist. I can't see you. I'm not an economist, so I'm not really prepared to answer your question. But I'm convinced that a democratic society needs, in a way, a market economy, because freedom needs economic independence. That's a mistake of the so-named reformers in Russia in the 90s was, Chubais or Gaidar or name them, that they thought we establish a market economy and then democracy will follow. This does not work this way around. But democracy without a market economy is, for me, from my point of view, doomed to fail as well. So yeah, that we need something, or Russia needs something like that, and at the moment we don't have that. At the moment we have again a state-dominated economy. It has been state-dominated in a broader sense all the time, and the main problem there was that until now there isn't really such a thing like private property in Russia. At least you can't be sure. And this is not the case in a big sense for entrepreneurs and for companies and for public listed companies and in the small things for Russian people as well. So the main fear among most of Russian people is that the state will sometime come and take their flats away from them again, which is one of the main successes of the economic reforms in the 90s, that more than 90% of Russians are house and flat owners at the moment, at current time. They really live in their own flats. What they own. This was an economic success, and it was in a way a societal success as well. And again, one have to mention that the Kremlin is doing everything to lower this fear. Nobody is talking about that people have to give away their flats, and they are. I think they are doing rightly so, because the nearer they come with interfering in private life, the more reluctant are people to let that go.
Thank you, Jens. So if we move on to the third question about no room for optimism, there's no leaders, if I remember correctly, there's no leaders with some vision of the future that is not rooted too much in the past.
Yeah, that's part of the strategy, if you want to take of the strategy of staying in power of Putin from the beginning on. Yeah, he has been eliminating everything which could endanger his power, and every opposition from the beginning on. And at some point in 2012, 13, 14 or so, I argued that there are only 1.5 politicians left in Russia, and that at that time have been Putin and Kadyrov, because he's, Kadyrov is the one exception of a politician which is not depending totally on Putin. Putin is depending on him as well. That's makes him a half politician. Then Navalny came, and he managed to become half a politician as well, and that's why he ended up in prison and is now dead. And that's right. Yeah, we don't have an opposition as well. But politics are a strange thing, and power is a strange thing. There is nothing like a void in politics and power. Every void is immediately filled by someone. And at the moment when Putin will step away, there will be someone else. So, who will this be? We don't know. And this might be a person we don't know today. Who knew Putin in, let's say, July 1999? People who were...
He was the head of the KGB.
But if you ask someone in the West, even to who is the head of the KGB or the FSB, most people, everybody not dealing with Russia wouldn't say who you are. And if you were asking in Russia, most people didn't know as well. They couldn't tell the name because he was not important at that time.
Okay, thank you, Jens. So, could we have 3 more questions?
And
I see there's a hand at the back there, gentlemen. Yes. And then perhaps after that, you two.
Hello. Thank you very much for your very illuminative talk. I just had a question about what seems to be the central assumption of your book, is that the way to resolve this conflict between Russia and the West is for Russia to become democratic. Now, I was wondering how true that assumption is fundamentally, because, as you mentioned in your reply to one of the other questions, there is this perennial sense of national insecurity within Russia, and that seems to be a consensus across, wide swathes of society. Likewise, if you ask the average Russian, I think a lot of them would say they're probably against war, but a lot of them would probably say that Crimea is Russian, right? They would be very much against giving it back to Ukraine. Even Navalny himself famously said that Crimea is not a sandwich to pass it back and forth. So that's my question in a nutshell, is how far is a democratic Russia one that is likely to truly fundamentally change its foreign policy orientation?
can I be a super optimist, but in the Russian style, meaning it can get a lot worse? What if Russia isn't the odd one out, but is actually the canary in the coal mine, i.e. the things that are happening the post-factual media landscape, super aggression. We can now see something similar in the US, and we can see really worrying trends all across Europe, in Germany, certainly in this country, Reform UK, set to give us the next prime minister, and so on. And all these populist far right, there is no such thing as factual truth, and the one who is strongest and most mean and hostile wins. That seems to be on the rise, and they're really well connected among themselves. You know, LGBT rights, we don't like them, and so on. What about, you know, Russia is the vanguard of the new world order, and God forbid that from happening, I don't want it, but, you know, what about that scenario? Sorry to be so optimistic.
Thank you. I want to imagine a scenario where we have a power vacuum, as you were talking. A power vacuum. Putin has exited the picture. And if you sort of look at the kind of oligarchy around him, where does the true kind of quote-unquote power sit? Is it with the guys who are controlling Russia's energy assets? Is it people in parliament? Is it something that I haven't even mentioned? Like, I'm curious to see kind of where would the obvious leverage be in the absence of Putin?
Russia's national security issues. There's the question about the canary in the coal mine, and there is who has power after Putin.
I don't think that democratic Russia is a solution for the war and in Ukraine and what's going on now. But the outcome of the war will be a precondition for the chances of Russia to become democratic again. My thesis is more that if Russia isn't becoming democratic, then we have a problem we might not be able, not even be able to solve, but to withstand. And that brings me directly to your scenario. And then your scenario would be much more likely than it is maybe at the moment. And unfortunately, I'm in this sense, I'm as optimistic as you. That is a danger of coming out as well. It's something Russians tell us, me, for quite some time, that we in the West don't understand what is going on, that they are the front runners. Yeah, and not those Russians who are for democratic Russia, but those Russians who think in this in this way of that the world is a struggle of power and superpowers, and in this there is this German how to say, jurist. You don't. Huh? Lawyer? No, not a lawyer. He was a professor, Carl Schmitt, who said those is the only sovereign who has the power to decide without restrictions, and built on this as a theory, and he's very popular among scholars in Russia. And yes, maybe this is the case, but what should we do to end our fight, to end our work? No, we have to work against that, and to hope that in our society this was not the case. And coming back to the Cold War, there was somewhere was a question about the Cold War as well. Huh? Yeah, first question. There has been an understanding that the West won the Cold War. Yeah, and in a way this was really the case. Russians now argue, or many Russians now argue, that was for a time, but in the long run, we Russians will succeed. That was only so to say, one battle in the war. You won, you didn't win the war. But what led to that, to this win? In Germany, people tend to put the so-named Eastern policy on the front. Eastern policy, which was by Willy Brandt, to open up to the Soviet Union, to interact with the Soviet Union, and to hope for change through this interaction. And there is even some repercussions of that. It's the now German president and former foreign minister Steinmeier rephrased this. At that time, it was a phrase change through coming closer to each other, and he said change through dealing with each other, yeah, or to trade with each other. But that was only one part of the Western effort in the Cold War. The second part was, you can say, Robert Reagan, who said, we are arming, and they can't withstand that. Economically, we are succeeding because their economy will break down because they can't compete in this arm race because we are stronger. That was the case as well. But then there was, in my opinion, there was a third part of this. The third part in that time was that the societies in the West, the democratic and market economy societies in the West, were convinced that our political and societal model was morally and economically stronger than the Soviet model, and that we were convinced of that we in a way had faith in that, was the precondition of opening up to the Soviet Union, because this phrase opening up for change might have been the other way around. Okay, the Soviet Union opened up, the West opened up, and we became more close to, more similar to the Soviet Union. But we were convinced that it must be the other way around, because our political and societal model, how we organized were democratic societies, that was was more powerful, has more power, and we have been right with that. If you have been spoken to people in the Soviet Union, they had opinions of how the life in the West was that were, you know, out of paradise. And I don't know who of you have been in Russia in the 1990s. Always when I said, this is not working in the West very well, in our country it's not working very well, they looked at me that I'm a fool. You know, everything is marvelous in your time. They couldn't see any flaws in what was in the West. So what I want to say is, first we have to bring our house in order as well, and then maybe we can be attractive for others, like the Russian, or this model can be attractive for others and the Russian people as well. And the last question about who's Yeah, who is the power behind Putin? Or is there a power apart? In the absence of Putin. Yeah, and today behind Putin. Yeah, that's the big question we don't know. And we can't know because there is only Putin at the moment. Putin is the one who is deciding everything. What he decides comes with a cost. Yeah, it's not for free for him. Everything he decides he have to cost. But he's the arbiter of everything in Russia, and he can at the moment he can order anything. Then he has to live with the consequences. But he can do it at the moment, and therefore there is he has this experience with Medvedev. In 2008, he decided, why ever, nobody knows for sure, that he won't change the constitution and that he has to step down after 2 terms of president. I'm convinced that if he would have chosen to change the constitution, that very smoothly would have worked, and he could have stayed as a president. But he chose not to do so, and to put a proxy as a president, as everybody knew in Russia and everybody knew in the world that Medvedev is not the real president, that he is the president under the prime minister Putin. Yeah, but the image of Medvedev as someone younger, someone more modern in a way, more open to new developments, someone who traveled to the Silicon Valley with an iPad and an iPhone in his hand, and Putin has never been seen with a mobile or a computer, and until today there are rumors that he's never looking into the computer. That he's not that he really does not know what the internet is, yeah, or something like that. But there is this young, this modern-looking guy, and even though everybody knows that he's not the man with real power, his appearance invoked hope in many people in Russia that things might get more democratic, more liberal again. And that Putin saw that as well. He saw how this works. And that I'm convinced that's the reason why after 4 years he decided to come back, because he couldn't let to happen that. And Medvedev was either he didn't want or he was too weak to run against Putin. He accepted his fate back then. But the lesson Putin draw from that is that if you open up, then the ghost can very, very quick come out of the bottle, and to bring it back in is very difficult, because what happened after Medvedev on the 24th of September 2011, a convention of the United Russia Party told that he very liked to be president, but he knows someone who is a much better president than he, and that is Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. Russia became the protest in the winter of 2011, in 2012, and it was a very big effort to get this ghost into the bottle as well.
Yes, unfortunately, I think we have to.
Yeah. So
draw things to an
to sum this up, there is nobody, and there can't anybody be at the moment. This will be a surprise at this moment. Who will then stick up? And very likely someone from the security forces, from the military, maybe after the war, which is happens very often after a war. Maybe, but we don't know.
Well, on that note, I apologize people who had questions that didn't have time to ask them. I would like to thank hugely Jens for coming today and traveling quite a long way to come to talk to us. I think it was a really fascinating talk with lots of insight based on your long career. I mean, we've been talking obviously about Russia's domestic politics. And at this moment, obviously, we should be aware that it's not only Russians who suffer from Russia's domestic politics. It's above all the people in Ukraine. And I think that is something that obviously lies behind everything we've been talking about today. Maybe it hasn't been mentioned all the time, but certainly it's something that we're all deeply aware of and concerned about. Having said that, Jens, thank you so much. And I hope...
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I hope maybe there'll be a second time when we can invite you to come and talk to us. Thank you.
Will be my pleasure.